So ladies and gentlemen, so my name is Michael. I'm the head of growth here at Outsource CFO. And as I like to say, my role is basically to connect the smart people with the other smart people to find solutions and to solve problems. Tim, on the other hand, is the founder of Home Energy. And what they essentially do is connect people to power in this day and age of darkness in South Africa. And basically they focus on supplier, installer and solar finance. So Tim, in his illustrious career, has raised basically R1 billion in debt and equity financing. So or rather fundraising, and he knows a thing or two about the discussion today.
Still learning, by the way.
Still learning, always learning. Yeah. That's the most important thing. So Tim and I, it's kind of like a business speed dating relationship. It was the first time we're meeting in person. It was about half an hour ago. So an interesting one. But from a home perspective, they were founded in 2021, have an absolutely meteoric rise over the past less than 24 months, and I've been through a couple rounds of fundraising. So today we're going to chat more specifically about the metrics and KPIs and tracking when it comes to fundraising, but we're going to free ball it a bit, as they kind of say, and see what kind of happens. But because we only have 10 minutes, we're going to really dive straight into it with the kind of pertinent questions. So Tim, taking that into consideration, what is your favorite food? No, I'm joking.
Sushi.
Sushi, me too, man. Nice.
Off to a good start.
Off to a good start. So Tim, taking that into consideration, apart from that terrible intro, when looking at fundraising, what do you think are some of the key and most important aspects throughout the process?
I think a lot of founders try and optimize for valuation and look for certain investors with a bit of star appeal, which is obviously very important because you want to get credibility onto your cap table. But it's not to shoehorn your fundraising strategy. It's to really look for the right investor-investee fit. And most people, I think, tend to look at it from a purely commercial point of view, which is numbers, KPIs, in a very structured form, and that's good. But I think fundraising is more art than science. And you need to really build good relationships with your investors. You need to suss out who they are as individuals, because once they give you the money, that's when the relationship starts. So you want to make sure you place the right bet. So I think just really doubling down hard on the people fit is something that most founders tend to not do, because they get really drawn into the quantum, what that money will do for their business in terms of capital allocation, what it might do in terms of perception, in terms of valuation, and who the investors are, but really focusing on making sure that there's really good fit and alignment.
No, absolutely, fair enough. I think that's an incredibly important point. When you spoke in the back, we spoke about capital and character, right? In terms of not only being able to access the capital, but someone who's able to increase your network, be able to add to what you're doing, and create value from a numerous and different points of view. So when looking at investors throughout this dating process, what are a couple of the most important things that you consider when looking at potential investors that not only you would like to attract their attention from, but ultimately bring on board?
So I think if I take a step back, it's more how do you get their attention? And while I am a big proponent of getting as many conversations out there as you possibly can, it allows you to refine your pitch, it allows you to get valuable feedback that ultimately puts you in a better position to potentially raise the money that you're looking for. I think having really strong other alternative founder introductions to investors is very powerful, and I would rather say doubling down on those and get as much insight from an existing founder who may have invested on their cap table that they could give you some insights about. They can give you also some input to your pitch deck and your narrative, which again helps you prepare better, but then really looking at pursuing founder introductions. If I just look at my cap table, I've got over 21 people in Home's cap table at the moment. Of those 21, 20 were founder introductions. So I think it speaks to the velocity and the probability of actually getting good investor-investee fit. But again, don't discount obviously doing any cold pitches.
Very interesting. And throughout this process of, lots of pitches, right? Lots of cold, lots of warm.
Yeah.
But taking a look back at the many that you've done, what were some of the biggest challenges that you encountered, not only dealing with people, but the process around fundraising too?
Herding cats. I mean, if I, again, look at the fundraising process, you start off doing research, you look for territory mandate fit, you look for stage fit, you look for tangential industries potentially, or even kind of like business model. Business models are the same that they've invested in before, so they've got some valuable insights. You look for their broader community network that they've built around them, and you can kind of start with a Kanban of leads in, and then you're trying to push those leads further down the funnel. And it's quite a stressful process. I mean, there've been many times where I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Why are they not moving? You name it, holidays, COVID. There are just so many factors that are just out of founder's control. And I think the big thing is not to lose hope. And obviously to build your funnel as big as possible so that you've got some probability on your side. But again, goes back to my earlier comment, just getting really good introductions. I think that builds trust very quickly, and trust is very important to build velocity in your fundraising process. Trying to build trust early on, because that's really what investors are trying to do, and you should also be doing with an investor, takes time. So you really have to, you're speed dating, your business is growing rapidly, you need to deploy capital very quickly. You're basically asking everyone to make a very quick decision within ideally 3 months. More realistically, in some cases, can be as long as 6 months, and obviously there's stories where it has taken much longer. If you just speak to a lot of founders who raised last year, I think they'll say it was an absolute bloodbath in terms of how long it would take for them to raise money. So yeah, I think just really building a good funnel, really looking for quality investors, looking for strong introductions, and not to lose hope.
Very important. The not to lose hope situation, since we have all just gone through an interesting time with COVID. But there was something that you mentioned there which really struck a chord with me, and that is building trust. Not an easy thing to do. Very difficult, specifically in like a hyperbolic environment where everything's got a close magnifying glass on it. How is that something that you look at and look at sort of connecting with people on that trust level to kind of build that foundation as early as possible?
I think the sooner you can ask questions like, tell me a scenario where things have gone wrong in another investee portfolio company and how you responded, the better. The sooner you can speak to not just one GP, but multiple GPs, and you get to kind of suss out the team. Because any business, doesn't matter if it's an investor or a startup or just a general company, it's always a sum of the people. So you want to make sure that the culture of the people is pretty consistent, and that you can take a judgment call on to make sure that this is a good home for you from a founder's perspective. So I think that's the one that really comes to mind.
And always an interesting question in a bit of review, but there's a lot of people here who are very much interested in fundraising this year. With the experience that you've had, with the road that you've walked, some successful, some unsuccessful, what would you not do again?
So, one short bit of context. My business sits on the intersect between energy, which is infrastructure, but it's on-grid in Africa, which isn't sexy. We're not electrifying people who've never had access to electricity before. We are giving people energy security who are living in some of the wealthiest households in the country. That was an overlap problem. Then we are helping banks, retail banks, deploy financing through our marketplace. So you could squint and say it's a bit of a fintech. So what I struggled with is that we sat on the intersect of those two, but we kind of are very unique. There wasn't another example we could point to awards in Africa. And what that basically created in me when I was going through my fundraising journey was trying to shoehorn mandate. So trying to get my business to appeal to investors on either side, really pushing hard to try and get them to see the light, no pun intended, and it didn't work out well. It ended up with a lot of conversations and a lot of disappointment. I think really focusing on investors who get excited about the opportunity. So it doesn't matter what industry they're in. So again, this is kind of like I'm talking myself out of my previous advice around doing the research, building that Kanban of all suitable investors, really finding investors who back the vision and forget about territory, forget about TAM, and like really back the operators to figure those things out, I think are the right kind of investors to look for. So I would say not shoehorn who you're speaking to, have conversations, and really try and find the right investors, especially if you're coming from a place like I was where it didn't really fit in one specific category.
Okay, interesting to note. And then I see Lucille is giving me the eyes at the back in order to wrap things up. So I think just the final question from my side, Tim, and for anybody who's considering this process this year, couple words of advice, couple things that you think that are really pertinent in terms of fundraising in 2023.
I think don't try and optimize for valuation. That's the reality. I think valuation is a distorted metric that most founders try to aspire towards. If you get the right investors, your valuation will come. So that definitely is one. I think be very conservative with how you're deploying capital. Again, I'm going to contradict myself, but be very conservative. Try and get to a place where you can be profitable. That's our game plan. We want to be profitable this year, and we still want to be raising money. It gives you a position of strength. And then lastly, look for a really good, solid lead investor who you almost could see as potentially becoming an advisor. That's kind of the positioning that I'm trying to portray here. Someone who just backs the business, not just because they think this is a good place to put capital, but get someone who really believes in what you're doing, who becomes your champion. Because you want someone like that to network all the other investors around their community to come into your business, whether it's in the current round or whether it's in future rounds. So again, and I'll speak about this openly. I had my lead seed investor come in. We tussled on valuation, and I made a judgment call on character, and I can tell you the best decision I've ever made. He created over demand for my funding round, and is going to probably help us raise the next 2 rounds, hands down. So yeah, don't try and optimize for those things. Really pick the right people and persevere.
Thank you, Tim. Ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, Tim is taking a much-deserved holiday from tomorrow, so this is his last task for the week. So if we could please have a big round of applause for Tim Olsen from Home Energy. Thank you.